A young, struggling student found himself facing an offer he never imagined. Just 7 days after marrying a 71-year-old wealthy woman, he stood stunned in the small, rain-slicked college town of Texas. Mark Davis, only 23, trudged down the sidewalk with a heavy heart, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. His face showed the exhaustion of a life burdened with law school, a part-time job, and overwhelming debts left by his late father. Each day, it felt like the walls were closing in tighter. His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his racing thoughts. "Mark Davis speaking," he answered, his voice steady. A composed, authoritative tone responded on the other end. "Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I'd like to meet with you. It's regarding your financial situation." Mark frowned, confused. "I'm sorry. Who are you? How do you know about that?" "I know enough," she interrupted smoothly. "Let's meet at Brooks' Bistro at 7 p.m. It's important." The call ended before Mark could protest. His confusion deepened, but curiosity pushed him forward. He made his way to the UPS Scale Cafe, where the rain fell even harder, soaking his jacket, which did little to shield him from the downpour. As he stepped inside, the warmth from the bistro hit him, along with the inviting aroma of fresh coffee. At a corner table sat Eleanor Brooks, an elegant woman with silver hair, styled perfectly and dressed in a tailored suit that oozed wealth. She greeted him with a calm but commanding tone. "Mark," she said, motioning for him to sit. "Mrs. Brooks, what is this about?" Mark asked, still unsure of what he had walked into. "Straight to the point." "Good," she replied, sipping her tea. "Mark, I know about your debts, the ones your father left behind. I know you're barely getting by. I'm here to offer a solution." Mark's brow furrowed. "And what would that be?" She set her cup down, her piercing blue eyes locking with his. "Marry me." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to believe. Mark blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't about romance. It's a business arrangement. I will pay off all your debts, ensure your financial security, and in return, you'll be my husband." Mark let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're serious? Why me? You don't even know me." Eleanor leaned in slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Exactly. You're young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider this. I don't need love, Mark. I need a companion. Someone to share my name, my estate, and nothing more. Think of it as a contract." Mark shook his head, the absurdity of it all racing through his mind. "This is insane. What's in it for you?" Her expression softened for the first time. "I've spent my life alone, Mark. I have no children, no family left. I want companionship, even if it's just for appearances. And I want control of my legacy. A husband will help solidify that." Mark stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I can't. I need time to think." "Of course," she replied coolly. "But don't take too long. The offer doesn't stand forever." Mark walked home that night, the rain soaking through his clothes, his thoughts as heavy as the sky above. Mark sat at the kitchen table, his eyes downcast, his hands fidgeting nervously. Across from him, his mother's pale face was etched with worry, the weight of their financial troubles hanging heavy in the air. The cost of her treatments had drained them both, and his younger sister's tuition loomed over them like an impending storm. After he explained Eleanor's proposition, his mother spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of a mother's desperation. "I know it sounds unthinkable, but if she's willing to help, maybe it's worth considering." Mark stared at his hands, his mind a whirl of emotions. Torn between his pride and his desperation, He struggled to find the right words. You're asking me to marry a woman I don't love just to solve our problems? I'm asking you to save yourself, she said, her voice trembling. To save us. The following morning, Mark found himself walking back to the bistro. Eleanor was already there, her demeanor as calm and composed as ever, her eyes glued to her tablet. Without looking up, she asked, You've decided? Mark took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. I'll do it. Eleanor's faint smile did not reach her eyes as she set down her tablet. Good. The arrangements will be made immediately. A week later, Mark stood in a small courthouse, dressed in the suit Eleanor had provided. The ceremony was quiet, witnessed only by Eleanor's lawyer and a notary. As they exchanged vows, Mark couldn't shake the unease tightening in his chest. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor turned to him, her smile barely a flicker on her lips. Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis. As they left the courthouse, the rain drizzling once again, Mark gazed down at his reflection in a puddle, the weight of his decision settling in. Had he just saved his family, or had he sold his soul? The gates to Eleanor Brooks' estate creaked open as Mark's cab rolled up the long driveway. The house loomed ahead, a massive mansion, so grand it could pass for a museum. Its towering columns and pristine stone facade radiated wealth, yet the windows seemed dark and lifeless. Mark stepped out of the cab, suitcase in hand, feeling like a visitor in someone else's dream, or perhaps nightmare. Eleanor greeted him in the foyer, her polished demeanor sending a chill down his spine. Welcome, Mr. Davis, she said with formal precision. I trust you'll find everything to your satisfaction. Dinner is at 7. Mark nodded mutely, following a housekeeper who led him to his room. It was opulent, king-sized bed, antique furnishings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. Yet, despite the luxury, the room felt cold, untouched by warmth, as if it were a display rather than a home. That evening, Mark sat stiffly at the long dining table. Eleanor was at the far end, dressed impeccably in a silk blouse and pearls. The food was extravagant, prepared by a chef Mark hadn't seen yet, served by silent staff. I trust you're settling in, Eleanor said, cutting into her filet mignon with surgical precision. It's different, Mark replied cautiously. This place is huge. Feels like I'll get lost. Eleanor smirked, her gaze unwavering. You'll get used to it or you won't. Either way, you're here. Mark bristled at her bluntness. You didn't mention much about your late husband. Eleanor's knife paused mid-cut. She dabbed her mouth delicately with a napkin, her expression unreadable. Eleanor set down her napkin before speaking, her tone shifting as she looked at Mark. He was a businessman, much like your father. Their paths crossed once or twice, she said, her voice darkening. But as you might imagine, not all encounters end well. Mark's pulse quickened, his heart racing with curiosity and unease. What do you mean? He asked, his voice tight. She met his gaze, her eyes sharp and calculating. Let's just say unfinished business has a way of lingering. She picked up her glass of wine and took a slow sip. But that's in the past. You'll soon understand why I chose you. Her cryptic words left Mark feeling unsettled, as though there were a hidden layer to everything he was witnessing. After dinner, he wandered through the halls of the estate. The house was eerily silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. He passed several locked doors, their brass handles gleaming in the dim light. Each door seemed to whisper secrets that he wasn't meant to know. As the days passed, Mark's discomfort deepened. The staff began to avoid eye contact, speaking in hushed tones when they thought he wasn't listening. He overheard snippets of conversation that made his stomach twist with unease. Why him? Does he even know? She never does anything without a reason. He'll figure it out eventually. They always do. One evening, while pacing the library, Mark noticed Eleanor's desk. Papers were scattered across the surface, along with a small, ornate key. It gleamed under the desk lamp, its intricate design catching his eye. His gaze darted around the room. No one was there. Heart pounding, he reached for it. The key was heavier than he expected, cool to the touch. Mark's mind raced. Could this be for one of the locked doors? He glanced toward the hallway where shadows danced ominously against the walls. His breath quickened as he slipped the key into his pocket. That night, lying in his luxurious but suffocating room, Mark turned the key over in his hands, the weight of it pressing down on him. A million questions swirled in his mind, but one question loomed above all. What is Eleanor hiding, and why had she really chosen him? The mansion was draped in stillness when Mark crept down the hall. The key felt like a lead weight in his pocket, its cool surface pressing against his thigh. His pulse quickened as he approached the door he had noticed earlier. The ornate handle gleamed faintly in the moonlight that streamed through the windows. Glancing over his shoulder, Mark turned the key in the lock. The soft click echoed through the silence, sending a chill down his spine. Slowly, he pushed the door open. Inside was a time capsule, frozen in another era. Dusty furniture and faded wallpaper surrounded him. Photographs in tarnished silver frames lined a table, capturing happier times. Eleanor as a young woman, a man who must have been her late husband, and another couple Mark didn't recognize. But it was the stack of papers on the desk that caught his attention. Mark flipped through them, his eyes widening. They were legal documents detailing failed business deals between Eleanor's husband and Mark's father. One particular letter, written in sharp, slanted handwriting, accused Mark's father of fraud. You ruined everything. My family was left with nothing because of your lies. Mark's breath hitched as he noticed the last page, an old marriage license. His name and Eleanor's stared back at him starkly against the paper. The date was weeks before their wedding, far earlier than he had known. On the desk lay an old leather-bound diary. Mark hesitated, his heart racing before opening it. The entries were Eleanor's, revealing a calculated plan to trap him into a marriage that would fulfill her ultimate goal, to settle old scores. I will take everything from him, just as his father did to me, one entry read. He will be my pawn. Mark froze. His pulse thudded in his ears when the door creaked open behind him. Enjoying yourself? Eleanor's voice was icy, cutting through the shadows like a blade. Mark spun around, guilt and fear evident on his face. Eleanor, His voice faltered as she stepped further into the room, her silhouette sharp against the dim light from the hallway. Curiosity killed the cat, Mark, she said, her tone cold and mocking. What do you think you're doing? Mark's voice was low but firm. Why did you really marry me? Is this about my father? Is this some kind of revenge? Eleanor's eyes hardened, her usual composed facade cracking. It's not your place to ask questions, Mark. Just do what you're told and you'll leave this marriage better off than you started. Isn't that enough for you? Mark's fists clenched at his sides, his frustration rising. Enough! You've lied to me, manipulated me. This isn't a marriage, it's a trap. Eleanor's lips curled into a faint, cold smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. A trap, is it? Maybe you should have thought twice before signing those papers. She stepped closer, her tone venomous. You may think you're smart, Mark, but you're just like your father, blind to the damage you cause until it's too late. Mark's glare deepened, the weight of his father's legacy pressing down on him. If you hated him so much, why take it out on me? I had nothing to do with what he did to your family. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching uncomfortably between them. Finally, she turned on her heel. You're in over your head, Mark. Stay out of matters that don't concern you." With that, she left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hall. Later that night, Mark lay wide awake in bed, his mind racing. Eleanor's words haunted him, but so did the documents in the diary. Why had she gone to such lengths to entangle him in her schemes? Was it really just about revenge? His thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of Eleanor's voice from down the hall. He slipped out of bed and crept toward her study, pressing his ear against the door. "Make sure the transfer is complete," Eleanor's voice commanded, sharp and authoritative. "We can't let him back out now. Time is running out." Mark's blood ran cold. Whatever was happening, he knew he was in deeper than he'd ever imagined. Mark sat alone in the grand library, his mind a whirlpool of fear and confusion. Eleanor's cryptic words and the damning contents of the locked room made it clear he was in over his head. The once imposing estate now felt like a prison. The gilded prison, with its luxurious trappings, concealed dark secrets that Mark could no longer ignore. That evening he approached Mr. Harris, the estate's head butler, a man whose calm demeanor suggested he had seen and heard more than he let on. "Mark," Mr. Harris greeted him, his voice steady. "I knew it wouldn't take long before you came to me." Mark, his heart pounding, met his gaze. "Mr. Harris, I need your help. Something isn't right here." The older man regarded him with a steady gaze, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mark, you know something, don't you? About Eleanor. About all of this." Mr. Harris hesitated before speaking. "You're not the first young man to be drawn into Eleanor's world. Mark, she's clever, resourceful, and ruthless when it comes to her goals. My advice to you, watch your back." Mark's chest tightened with dread. "Why are you still here, then, if you know what she's capable of?" Mr. Harris's expression softened for a moment, a flicker of regret passing across his face. "Some of us don't have the luxury of walking away." Determined to find a way out, Mark began devising a plan. He reached out to a trusted friend from law school, Peter. Under the guise of catching up, Mark casually asked, "Peter, hypothetically, if someone signed a contract under coercion or false pretenses, is there any way to avoid it?" Peter, curious, replied, "Hypothetically, yes, but it depends on the evidence. Why? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Mark deflected. "Just a class project I'm working on." "Thanks, man." In the following days, Mark searched Eleanor's office whenever she was away, hoping to uncover something that could explain her obsession with his father. Late one night, as he rifled through her desk, he found an envelope addressed to his father. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter was a scathing condemnation written by Eleanor herself. It accused Mark's father of embezzlement, fraud, and deceit that had led to the financial ruin of Eleanor's family, and ultimately, the death of her husband. "You left us with nothing," the letter read. "My husband's heart couldn't take the stress, and he's gone because of you. I will see to it that your family pays for what you've done." Mark's stomach churned as he read the words. Eleanor's actions weren't just about reclaiming her fortune. They were about revenge, fueled by years of pain and anger. Returning the letter to its hiding place, Mark resolved to act. He couldn't allow Eleanor to use him as a pawn in her vendetta. That night, he began mapping out possible escape routes from the estate. But Eleanor's sharp instincts caught wind of his unease. The next morning, she found him in the breakfast room, her icy presence cutting through the quiet. "Eleanor," Mark began, his voice tight, but she cut him off. "You've been busy, haven't you?" she said coldly, her eyes narrowing. Mark froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "I don't know what you're talking about." Eleanor smiled, the expression chilling. "Don't play coy with me, Mark. If you think you can outsmart me, you're sorely mistaken. I've dealt with far craftier opponents than you." Mark swallowed hard, his pulse quickening as he tried to keep his voice steady. I don't know what you're accusing me of, but I'm not doing anything wrong. Eleanor leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. If you think you can escape me, Mark, you're gravely mistaken. If you betray me, you'll wish you hadn't. Remember that. Eleanor's voice was cold, her words cutting through the air before she straightened and left the room. Mark was left alone, grappling with the growing realization that escape might be more dangerous than staying. But staying meant surrendering his life to Eleanor's twisted plans, a fate he refused to accept. The air in the estate felt charged as Mark paced the library, the weight of his discovery pressing heavily on his shoulders. The private investigator he'd quietly hired had just left, confirming the devastating truth. Eleanor's late husband, Harold Brooks, had been swindled by Mark's father in a fraudulent real estate deal that stripped the Brooks family of their fortune. Harold's death from a heart attack soon after was the final blow, leaving Eleanor embittered and determined to exact revenge. Eleanor's proposal to marry Mark had been more than just a calculated plan to settle scores. It was a way to make his family suffer, even from beyond the grave. Mark clenched his fists, anger coursing through him. How could she blame me for my father's sins? But as much as he resented Eleanor's actions, he couldn't deny the pain that had driven her. That evening, Mark met his law school friend Peter in secret. With Peter's help, he compiled the evidence he had collected from Eleanor's office and the investigators' findings. Among the documents, they discovered Eleanor's involvement in current business dealings that bordered on illegal, shady partnerships and falsified reports designed to rebuild her empire at any cost. Peter, Mark said, his voice low, this is enough to take her down. But you need to be careful. If she realizes you're on to her, there's no telling what she might do. Peter nodded gravely. I know, but it's time to put an end to this. The next morning, Mark waited in the grand sitting room, the evidence tucked securely in his bag. When Eleanor finally entered, her icy composure intact, he stood to face her. Mark, we need to talk, he said firmly. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her tone clipped. Is that so? What could possibly be so urgent? Mark's voice was resolute as he pulled out the documents. I know everything about my father, about Harold, about what you've been doing to rebuild your fortune. For the first time, Eleanor's calm exterior faltered. Her eyes flicked to the papers in Mark's hand. You've been snooping again, haven't you? Do you even understand what your father did to my family? Mark stepped closer, his voice rising. I understand that. But what about the people you've hurt along the way? What about me? I didn't do anything to deserve this. Eleanor's jaw tightened. And my family deserved to lose everything? My husband deserved to die of stress and heartbreak while your father lived comfortably? Don't talk to me about fairness, Mark. Mark's hands shook as he held up the evidence. Revenge won't bring him back, Eleanor. And it won't undo what happened. You've spent your life consumed by this, hurting innocent people, ruining lives. Lives. When does it end? Eleanor's shoulders sagged slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Mark thought he saw something close to regret in her eyes. Eleanor, he said softly, his voice filled with an unexpected compassion. You remind me of him, you know. Harold. That same fire, that same stubbornness. Her gaze softened as she continued. I didn't expect to feel anything for you, Mark. But here we are. Mark hesitated, caught off guard by her admission. If you really feel that way, then stop this. Let it go before it's too late. But before Eleanor could respond, the sound of car tires crunching on gravel echoed through the estate. Moments later, uniformed police officers entered the room, followed by Peter. Officer Eleanor Brooks, we have a warrant for your arrest. You're being charged with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. Eleanor's face hardened, her gaze shifting from the officers to Mark. "Eleanor, you called them?" Mark met her gaze, his voice steady. "You left me no choice." As the officers led Eleanor away, she turned back to Mark one last time. "You may think you've won, Mark, but revenge isn't so easily undone. Be careful it doesn't consume you, too." Mark watched her go, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over him. He had exposed the truth and protected himself, but the weight of Eleanor's parting words lingered. Was she right? Would the shadow of their shared past ever truly fade? The gavel's sharp bang echoed through the courtroom, signaling the end of Eleanor Brooks's trial. Mark sat silently in the back row, watching as the once commanding woman he had married faced the consequences of her actions. Despite everything, his testimony had helped reduce her sentence. He hadn't done it out of sympathy, but out of a deep understanding of the complexities of their shared story. Eleanor turned briefly in her seat, her gaze meeting Mark's for the first time. There was no trace of the cold calculation that had defined her before. Instead, she offered a faint, almost apologetic nod. Days later, Mark was summoned to the estate one final time. The grand house, once intimidating and isolating, now felt empty. Eleanor had arranged for him to receive the property's deed. The estate lawyer handed Mark a letter in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "It was never about the money, Mark," the letter began. "It was about closure. Harold deserved justice, but I lost sight of what truly mattered. You've shown me something I thought I'd forgotten, the capacity to move forward. This estate is no longer a monument to my pain. It can be something more. Use it well." Mark sold the estate, a decision that came easily. Its grandeur had been a gilded cage for both him and Eleanor. The proceeds allowed him to pay off his family's debts, finally freeing his mother from the shadow of his father's mistakes. With the remainder of the funds, Mark established a scholarship fund in Harold Brooks's name. It was a way to honor the man who had unknowingly become a casualty in the feud between two families. Mark's return to law school felt like a homecoming. This time, he was more determined than ever to use his education for good. He interned at a legal aid center, helping individuals who, like Eleanor, had been wronged and left without recourse. One crisp autumn afternoon, a letter arrived for Mark. The handwriting was instantly recognizable. He sat on a park bench near campus and unfolded the paper, Eleanor's letter. "Mark, I've had much time to reflect. For years I believed that revenge would heal the wounds Harold's death left behind. But I see now that revenge is its own prison. Your kindness, even in the face of my mistakes, taught me something I never expected. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. Thank you for being better than the world around you. Thank you for showing me that we can break the cycles we inherit. I hope you find the happiness I never could. Eleanor." Mark stared at the letter for a long time, the words sinking in. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket, feeling an odd sense of peace. A year after Eleanor's arrest, Mark stood before a group of scholarship recipients at a small ceremony. Behind him hung a simple plaque, the Harold Brooks Scholarship Fund for Second Chances. Mark spoke with conviction, his voice steady and clear. "This fund isn't just about money. It's about creating opportunities for those who might otherwise be forgotten. It's about turning pain into purpose." After the ceremony, he sat alone for a moment, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. His path had been irrevocably altered, but for the first time, he felt he was walking in the right direction. Mark walked away from the ceremony, a soft smile on his face. He glanced up at the clear sky, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting. Eleanor's letter remained in his pocket, a quiet reminder of the lessons they both learned about redemption, justice, and the transformative power of forgiveness. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of resilience, redemption, and forgiveness. Mark's story reminds us that even in the face of betrayal and hardship, the choices we make can lead us to healing and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart and left you inspired, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and loved ones. Let's spread the message of hope and second chances far and wide. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales that move your soul and remind us all of the power of compassion, forgiveness, and love. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with another soul-stirring story. Until then, take care and remember to cherish the lessons life brings.